So we've spoken about the possibility of the Torah perspective on evolution. We got to the point of humanoids. In other words, we have no issue with evolution as the way God created. Evolution without creation is highly illogical, highly improbable, and there are some real questions that plus the basic issue, which is the origin of finite existence, to which there is no alternative to creation. Science does not have an answer. There's a lot of speculation, but science has not found any scientific answer. Once again, the one thing that the evolutionists have yet to produce, and I don't know if they've given up yet or what, and that is life itself does not seem to have evolved. There was no life, and then there was a cell. And to go from no life to a cell that then reproduces it defies the laws of probability in every single way. Unless you accept this theory that there are an infinite number of universes, although we have absolutely no clue whatsoever to such a thing really existing. So you're going to have to believe in a lot of things. And it's difficult to call that science. Science doesn't mean, okay, I'll make something up. Why are you a scientist? If someone decides that in order to answer a question, I will therefore declare that there is an infinite number of universes, why is that science? Science is the study of that which is. Science is based on proof. Okay, are we all right?
Yeah. What does Rabbi say on de-evolution? I feel like we've de-evolved. Like we've become more and more like animals over the years.
Spiritually, but we're becoming more and more sophisticated.
I think like the technology has been.
In terms of sophistication, we're definitely ahead of our predecessors.
Yeah.
In terms of just what we are as human beings, strength of character, creativity. Would any of us have invented the wheel? For example, we're very good at taking whatever's existing, whatever we know, and then putting it together and taking it a step further. But in terms of coming up with those first ideas, would we have thought of that?
Well, I'm saying a step further, even like the generation now, the young, like the kids now, they're just like, they seem like they're just like programming them to just be like really stupid. They're like putting them like in front of iPads.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Definitely the character of the human being has deteriorated, but we're still much more sophisticated. Yeah.
Even if science has an answer for how life first came on the scene, I would say they would also have to explain how the reproductive mechanism mutated for the genes being passed down for new cells.
Of course, that's part of it. That's part of it. It's this miraculous thing. I assume he's not miraculous. This thing called a cell that can just reproduce. That's what life is. We define life as cells replenishing themselves. When you're alive, your cells replenish themselves, and even though the cells themselves are constantly dying, but they're creating new ones, Death is when they only destroy themselves, they only cease to function and don't create new ones. No, that's when one decomposes. So if there is creation, that means there's a creator, and the creator had a purpose. So once we've established that, then we have to go and seek out the purpose. For anyone that doesn't believe in creation, for whatever reason he's chosen not to, even though logically there is no alternative out there, but say he's chosen not to, say he's a skeptic, then there is no purpose in life. And there also is no absolute right and wrong.
Why does there have to be purpose?
If there's no creator, no, I'm making a point. There is no purpose in life, and there's no right and wrong. So, for example, when the founding fathers of the United States of America wrote the Declaration of Independence, they were the ones that came up with the statement that all men were created equal. Why did they put creation in there? Because they were religious? They were. But you gotta understand they had to put creation in there. Because if there is no creation, then who is to say equality is true? Who says that there's equality? Who is to say that we have to offer equal opportunity? What's wrong with the theory that might makes right? Survival of the fittest? Or in good old American capitalistic terminology, dog eat dog. Who says that's not right? Who says one is better than the other? If there is no creator, who is to decide that one is better than the other? There's no reason why one is better than the other.
Like even if there was no meaning, it could still be. You could still logically come to the conclusion that working together would be more beneficial for society.
Okay, so the answer is we're not looking for truth. We're looking for what's practical.
Yeah.
Okay? In other words, a true non-believer would have to say that the concept of equality is not truth, but it's practical. So if someone doesn't believe in it,
Doesn't believe in what?
he says, I don't want to accept equality. You know, I believe in favoritism. I believe in bigotry. Is he more right? Is he more wrong than anybody else? He's not wrong. You can tell him that's not livable. In this world, no one's safe. For the sake of our safety, we have made such a decision. But you can't call it truth. You have to say we have chosen the more practical way to live. Get your name straight. If someone doesn't believe in it, his crime is not that he's defying truth. He's just not working for the benefit of society. Right? So there's a very big difference. Creation gives values. Without creation, it's all a matter of what works. Now let's go a little further. If you believe that something is more workable and someone disagrees, do you have the right to force him to buy into your idea of what's going to work best? Who gave you that right? Meaning there's a legitimacy to his view that's no different than yours. You believe this is the most practical way to live, and therefore you want to go and force it on everybody? With what right can you force this on anybody?
But you don't need a right because there's no creator.
So what I'm basically saying is I'm bigger and stronger than you, and I'm going to force you to accept equality. Now, something's wrong with that. I am using my might to bring out what I believe is right for humanity. Right? Let nobody get up and say, as a liberal, if you're anti-democratic, you have no right to exist. You may be claiming to fight for democracy, but what you're really doing is showing that might makes right, because you have the upper hand. You are forcing me to accept something that is not objectively true. Is that clear?
By saying a statement, you're proving yourself wrong.
Yeah.
But just say you are the mighty. So you understand, for whatever logic, that equality is the right way forward. That doesn't mean that practically you might have more power and be able to force people in order to live in that society.
But you're telling me that I've got to buy into your theory, or else.
You're either with us or you're against us.
Okay, so what's wrong with being against us? Why can you force me to be with you? Because you're big and strong. So what you're basically saying is might makes right.
What if you don't? What if you don't say or else? What if you just say this is equality, take it or leave it type thing?
Fine. But you can't delegitimize those who say otherwise. Because you yourself are making use of might makes right to force your way in. You can't delegitimize those who disagree with you.
But there could still be some sort of truth to it.
Not truth that it's practical. Who said I have to do what's practical? You're telling me I've got to because you're threatening me.
I'm On the flip side, say you're not the majority.
And you just make a suggestion.
You can make a suggestion. You can make a suggestion. That's fine. But you can't go tell me this is objectively right and then delegitimize everyone else's right to differ.
But that same person believes in science, believes in the learning from the past and learning from history and these other things. And they've seen that when society works together, it's better for society.
Fine. But do you have a right to force me to do that? Telling me that that my way of living is objectively wrong? It's immoral?
But you still share ideas. Like, you have a right to freedom of speech and to discuss your ideas.
But why don't I have the right to choose the way I live? Who told you that I can't choose the way I want to live?
There's no meaning.
There's no meaning to anything. Life is an accident.
There's no real consequence.
Yeah. You can't tell me that anything's objectively right then.
So what would the answer be?
There is no answer. There is no answer. Because understand, when we talk about the meaning of life, when we talk about objective right and wrong, it is all based on the fact that there's a creator, and he had a purpose, and he sets right and wrong. Once you don't accept that, there is no absolute right and wrong. There is no meaning. And although you can believe that a certain way of living is the best for society, you cannot force your way on others unless you believe that might makes right.
But if you're coming from a God point of view, then you could force.
We got to make sure that God said this is right and this is wrong, and I can set up a society where whatever's wrong, has to be gotten rid of.
But what about if you turn it back on them instead of trying to answer the question? Can you ask them a question? No.
What would that question be?
Well, that would be. Well, you could be asked, "What's the point of this conversation?" Like, you could be like, you could be like, "Yeah, ask them. Is there any meaning? We don't have to have this conversation."
Unless you acknowledge that there's a creator, then all discussion of how to live is a matter of preference, personal preference.
In some cases, we see that might also makes right. Like we see you mentioned the founding fathers, they used force, military action against the British because they believed what they were doing was right. Because
they believe in God. They said, well, men were created equal. They said that there's a creator and equality is something that is right, that is absolute truth.
So they did it through Torah
by the Bible. They did it through the Bible. They weren't. They were not Jews.
The point is, if there's no creator, then there's no meaning.
There's no meaning, and there's no right and wrong.
And if there's no meaning,
then there's no right and wrong. Then values are all arbitrary. If anything, you can say this is more practical, and that's why I'm doing it. You can't force your way on others.
but that practicality only works if everyone buys into it. That practicality only works if everyone buys into it.
Yes. You cannot force your way. You cannot force anyone to do this, and it's not going to work unless everyone's in agreement.
But that's kind of what the Muslims did. They forced their way into it, and now they've got people who agree.
The Muslims believe that that's where their prophet told them.
Okay, but say I don't believe in God, but I think that practically the best way to live life is for everyone to work together. And so maybe I have no right to tell anyone else that, but unless everyone else believes that we've got to work together, it's not going to work. So then I'm going to force everyone to work together.
With what right?
I don't have a right, I just believe it.
You'll do it. In other words, might makes right. Because you have the ability to force others, you will force them.
And then they can see that it's working. And then the ends could justify the means. Could the ends justify the means? Because I mean, your might makes right. I mean, it could, and then they see that it's working, and they'll be like, "Oh well, that was right." It's like you can have a person.
That was right. It's good. If you don't like it, you don't like it. You don't like it. You don't have to. You don't have to accept it. Besides, who says I have to work for the good of humanity? Who says I have to? There's no creator. Why do I have to work for the good of society?
I guess without a creator, it would just be like, it's just me. You see only your perspective. So what's good for me is good for me, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Understand that. There being a creator means there's absolutely right and wrong. There not being a creator, anyone who's going to tell you that something is wrong, that's all baseless. He has no right to say that. He's only making use of the fact that he has the upper hand, which means he believes that might makes right, although he will deny it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank God we have a creator.